It's happening! Hello! I hope you're all okay and all good. Welcome to another video. My name is George. For those of you who don't know, feel free to subscribe down below if you're not already. And this is my best books of 2020. I read 46 books in 2020. Not as many as I wanted to read, but I pretty much read wall-to-wall bangers. I was going through the list this morning because I wanted to make this video today, and I could literally read you the entire list of all 46 books that I read last year, and they were all pretty good. Like, I think there were only two that I was feeling really like meh about, and even they were okay. Like, I didn't hate anything that I read this year, which is kind of good. But with much deliberation, I have narrowed it down to the 10 books that I loved the most in 2020. These are in alphabetical order. These are just 10 favourites that I love in varying degrees, but they are probably the books that I feel like impacted me the most and that I remember the most from this year and that I just really, really loved. So let's do it. The first book on this list was quite a recent read, which is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. Clap When You Land is a novel told in verse from the perspectives of Camino and Yahaira. Camino lives in the Dominican Republic, Yahaira lives in New York City. They both live these two separate lives that are torn apart when their father dies in a plane crash. The gag is neither one of them knows the other exists, but they share a dad. I'm explaining this really badly. This is the story of the two of them trying to deal with their grief and trying to deal with the revelations of their father's secrets and the discovery of the other person and this whole other life that their father has been living without them knowing. It is so gorgeous. I mentioned this at the time as well. I was listening to the audiobook of With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo at the same time that I was reading this. I've not actually finished that book yet, so that'll probably be quite an early read of 2021, I guess, an early finished read of 2021. The thing with novels in verse, which I now realise I have 3 of on this list this year, is that there are so few words in the book that it feels like everyone has to be chosen so carefully to have the right impact. The fact that Elizabeth Acevedo managed to create 2 voices in verse, each with their own ways of coping with the things that were going on and retelling the things that were going on, it was absolutely incredible. I think I tweeted it. It might have just ended up in a draft because I've got this weird habit of writing tweets and then just drafting them instead of sending them. But I said, if you're not looking up from this book every few lines to just marvel at the structure of a particular metaphor, simile, sentence, feeling, I don't know if you're reading it right. It's so brilliant. And obviously I loved it because it's on this list of my favourite books of 2020. The next book on this list is The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. I have talked endlessly about this book this year. I absolutely loved it. This is the story of a boy called Michael. It takes him from birth all the way till when he is at university. It is about him discovering himself, discovering his inner power, his sexuality, his queerness, and opening himself up to that through the power of drag. It is a fantastic book that I read twice this year. I loved it. I got to do an event with Dean at the Edinburgh Book Festival, which was done digitally, which was so much fun. This book is amazing and without doubt obviously one of my best books of the year. It's in my best books of the year video, but like one of my best books ever. I stayed up very late reading this, crying. It's written in verse. It's absolutely amazing. I'm so excited for Dean's new book coming out in 2021 called Only at the Weekends. This is absolutely astonishingly good. And you should definitely read it. If you've not read it yet, I'm actually quite jealous of you because you get to experience this for the first time. And that's just everything. The next book on this list is Toffee by Sarah Crossan. This was quite an early read in the year for me. I remember reading this in the spring. It was another one that I ended up staying up really, really late to finish. It's another book that's written in verse. So purely alphabetically, the first 3 books I'm talking to you about are all written in verse. Get into it. This is the story of a girl called Alison who is not safe in her own home, so she runs away and hides in the shed of what she thinks is an abandoned house. But the house is not abandoned. Living in that house is an old woman who goes by the name of Marla, who mistakes Alison for her old best friend, Toffee, and invites her in. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous novel about identity, about family, about home, about where you belong. It's just absolutely stunning. I'm a huge fan of Sarah Crossan. I think I made this clear in like previous videos when I talked about books like One and Moonlight and We Come Apart. I think she's absolutely sensational. Again, like with the previous verse novels, it's those very carefully chosen words, those very carefully placed moments that just blow your head apart because they're so freaking great. So this too. The next book on this list is Only Mostly Devastated by Sophie Gonzales. This is another recent read of mine. I did talk about this in my recent reading reviews that I did a couple of weeks ago. Only Mostly Devastated is a queer YA retelling of Grease. I feel like I've done that pitch every single time I've talked about this book, but honestly, that is all you need to tell me to sell this book to me. I love Grease. If you happen to read Boy Queen this year, there is a Grease mention in it. I'm excited for Simon James Green's books that's coming out next year because it's about Grease. It's about doing a production of Grease at school. And this is an amazing queer YA retelling of that musical. It made me cry. I remember I was lying in bed reading it and just like silently crying, and Jordan turned to me and was like, "What's wrong? Has the book made you upset?" And I mean, it had. It was just really great. And one of my favorite things about this book is that you'll forget that it's a Grease retelling, and then you'll reach a point where you'll remember and you'll be like, oh, so this is this, and this person is this person. And that just gives me absolute life. Anyway, not told you the plot. It's about a boy called Ollie who falls for Will over the school holidays, and they have a summer fling, a summer romance, and he thinks he's going to go home, but then through some family complications, he ends up staying in that town and going to the same school as Will, only to find that Will is a completely different person to the one that he met over the summer. It's so good. If you like Grease, you will love this. I mean, if you like good books, you will also love this. So, you know, you should read this. Also, Sophie has a new book coming out next year called Perfect on Paper, which sounds absolutely brilliant. And much like the Simon James Green book, I forgot to include it in my most anticipated reads of 2021. I'm telling you about it now. So there. Speaking of Simon James Green, the next book on this list is Heartbreak Boys by Simon James Green. Heartbreak Boys is the story of Jack and Nate, two boys who have just had their hearts broken, determined to prove that they are absolutely fine and living their best lives when they go on a camping holiday with Nate's family. That's sort of the shorthand version, but the slightly longer version will tell you that this book is hilarious, like laugh out loud funny, so sweet, absolutely gorgeous, will make you cry because, like, I can't tell you why, but it did have me in pieces at the end. It's brilliant. Simon James Green is an absolutely wonderful writer. He's the author of Noah Can't Even, Noah Could Never, Alex in Wonderland, this, Life of Riley, which is a middle grade book, and You're the One That I Want, which comes out next year, and sounds absolutely amazing. Another Grease thing. It is a wonderful book about queerness, about being who you are, finding where you fit in the world. It's just really, really lovely. It's so uplifting and so brilliant. Yes. The next book on this list is a book that I do not own a physical copy of because I listened to the audiobook of it, and that is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. You Should See Me in a Crown is the story of Liz Lighty, a girl who does not feel like she fits in her prom-obsessed small town, but she is determined to get out of that when she finishes high school and go to the elite Pennington College to play in their world-famous orchestra and become a doctor. But when her financial aid doesn't come through, everything seems to fall apart and she has no idea what she's going to do until she is reminded of the scholarship given to the prom king and prom queen at her school. What follows is much hijinks as Liz gets involved in this competition to become prom queen at her school, doing events, having to compete in these weird contests just to be in the running to get this scholarship. The only thing that makes it halfway bearable is the new girl at school, Mac. But Mac is also running for queen, and maybe there's some feelings in there. It's a gorgeous queer YA rom-com that I absolutely loved. The audiobook is stunning if you're an audiobook listener. It's so great, and I'm really excited for Leah's new book that comes out in 2021. The next book on this list is We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. This is a book that I read earlier on this year, quite near the beginning of lockdown number 1, I think. It's the story of a girl called Marin who essentially left her entire life behind before she went to college. She hasn't spoken to anyone from her old life since she left it all behind, but now at winter break, months after all this has happened, her best friend or former best friend Mabel is coming to visit, and she's finally having to face all of these things that she has left behind. I've only read one piece of Nina LaCour's writing before, and that was You Know Me Well, which was her collaboration with David Levithan, which I absolutely loved. This is something else entirely. The writing is so beautiful. This entire book is achingly good. The whole book is just an ache. a massive gut punch and an ache. It just grips onto you and will not let go. I loved it so much. I couldn't put it down when I started reading it. It is a slow burn, but it's worth the slow burn. It's not like a pacey, rip-roaring, hilarious YA contemporary thing. It is very downbeat. It's very slow, and but in the best possible way. I'm not saying slow is a bad thing. I'm saying it is a good thing, and it's so, so gorgeous. It will hurt you in the best way. I loved it so much. Yes. The next book on this list is Heartstopper Volume 3 by Alice Oseman. This should come as a surprise to absolutely no one because I have not stopped talking about Heartstopper for basically the entirety of 2020. I think whenever I've even mentioned Alice's name, I've talked about the fact that at the start of this year, I reread Volumes 1 and 2 in preparation for Volume 3, and that reading Nick and Charlie, the novella that got released this year as a paperback for the first time, was what got me back into my reading mojo. So I'm a big fan of Alice. I'm a big, big fan of this. It's absolutely stunning. This is the third volume in the Heartstopper graphic novel series. It is the beautiful story of how Nick and Charlie came to be Nick and Charlie. It's beautiful. It's romantic. It's sweet. It's funny. If you're anything like me, you will just like ache and cry and just swoon over this book. Fourth volume comes out next year. We're all very excited about it. The next book is another one from Alice Oseman, which is Loveless. I buddy read this with Kathy. Ooh, gosh, I don't even know when it was. It just feels like the time means nothing. But I buddy read this with Kathy and absolutely loved it. I love the buddy read experience as well. I've never buddy read anything before. That's what all these tabs are for. This is where we had to get to like on each given day. But I really enjoyed like the buddy reading aspect of it and sort of reading something and getting to talk to the other person about it like the night of. I thought that was really, really fun. Anyway, so maybe more of that in 2021. I don't know. This is a story of a girl. This is the story of a girl called Georgia who has never kissed anyone, who's never fallen in love, who doesn't even know if she has those feelings, but is a fan fiction obsessed romantic and imagines that she will fall in love with someone one of these days. When she goes to university, she plans to have her big grand romance and it's just not happening for her and she can't figure out why. This is the first book to my knowledge that I have read where the main character identifies as asexual. So it's my first exposure to that kind of representation in a book and I really, really enjoyed it. I can't speak to how well it was represented, but from what I have read in some reviews, a lot of people have seen themselves portrayed quite clearly in this book and I think that's really great. I think it's amazing for Alice to write a book like this, a book that is so personal to her, and I thought it was an absolutely fantastic read. I loved the whole cast of characters. I loved that it was set over an entire year at university. I've not read a book that's done that, I think, since like Fangirl, and I really love that as like a structure, and it really, really worked for this book as well. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. So this too. And last but by no means least, my final favourite book of 2020 was Camp by L.C. Rosen. I was a huge fan of L.C. Rosen's debut YA novel, Jack of Hearts and Other Parts. I think it was one of my favourite books in the year that came out. But Camp is about 16-year-old Randy Kappelhoff who likes to spend his summers at Camp Outland, which is a summer camp for queer teens. It's the place where he feels most comfortable, where he sees his best friends, where he gets to take to the stage in their summer musicals. It's also where he has fallen in love with Hudson Aronson Lynn, who is a straight acting mask for mask kind of guy. The summer that this book takes place is something different because in this summer, Randy has rebranded himself as Dell and decided to make himself be the person that Hudson desires. If that makes sense. Does that make sense? He wants to be the person, he wants to be the kind of mask for mask guy that Hudson is looking for. He's determined to be that person. So he's basically changed everything about himself. He's not doing theatre this summer so that he can appeal to Hudson. I listened to the audiobook of this and it is a fantastic novel. I was enjoying it. I thought it was great. It was really interesting to see someone who is making these choices about changing themselves for the sake of love. And it was interesting as a listener to kind of be sat there thinking, I don't think this is a good idea, while this character is going about this and having those thoughts themselves and doing these things regardless. But even with that in mind, this book still managed to surprise me along the way and kind of throw a few curveballs in there. So it wasn't just what I thought it was going to be. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give it away. I thought it was so fantastic. I thought it was absolutely hysterically funny and I absolutely loved it. So I'm very excited for whatever it is that L.C. Rosen is going to write next as well. But I don't know if they've got a book coming out in 2021. Maybe 22. Who knows? So these, along with You Should See Me in a Crown and Camp, are my favourite books of 2020. I would love to hear if you have read any of these or if these are any of your favourite books of 2020. I would like to hear what your favourite books are as well. So whatever your favourite book of 2020 was, leave it in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. In a weird turn of events that I didn't quite expect, these are actually all YA novels this year. I don't know. I feel like usually there's like an adult title sprinkled in here and there when I do stuff, or something non-fiction, but apparently in the 46 books that I've read, I've been very, very YA focused, so what can you do? But that is the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, don't forget to put a thumb on it and subscribe down below if you want to see more. I love each and every one of your faces, and I'll speak to you as soon as I possibly can. If you made it this far, nearly forgot, please leave the book stack emoji in the comments below because, I mean, book stack. I love each and every one of your faces still, and I'll speak to you as soon as I possibly can. Bye!